Hi guys! So, learning target 2. Let's talk through some concepts, let's add to our notes, and then we have that activity that needs to be completed. Okay, so a little chemistry review. Period, atomic number, group / family. Here's our periodic table. Let's zoom in on this. Okay, so here's our periodic table, and the periods are actually the rows. Okay, so like this is period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Okay, so period 1, 2, 3, oh, missed that one, 3. Okay, the period relates to the energy level of the valence electrons, that we have higher energy levels for our valence electrons and lower energy levels for our valence electrons. And then we have groups or families. And the reason why we call the columns groups or families is because they mimic each other in characteristics. Like everything in group 1, these are alkaline metals. They are all highly reactive metals, especially in water. And then we have our alkaline earth metals, and they just have similar characteristics to one another as we go down the groups or the families. And then what was the other thing? Oh, atomic number. Atomic number is the number of protons in the nucleus of whatever atom we're talking about. So if we're talking about a potassium atom, it has 19 protons in the nucleus. Carbon has 6 protons in the nucleus of carbon atom. And that is what defines the element. Okay? If we change the number of protons, we change the element that we're talking about. So like if I have a carbon atom with 6 protons, and this atom gains a proton, takes one in, it's no longer carbon anymore. Now it's nitrogen. Now, what if it's not a proton that is gain or loss? What if it's an electron or a neutron? Because those are 3 our particles, subatomic particles inside of an atom. So I don't know, let's look at carbon again. So if I have 3 different carbon atoms, well, if they're carbon, then they all have 6 protons because that's what the definition is of a carbon atom. So number of protons, 6. Now, do you remember that the protons are the positive components of an atom, that they are positively charged? And so if we're going to have a carbon that is neutral, then we have to have an equal number of electrons in order for that to happen. Okay? And if we gain or lose an electron, that's when we create an ion. So when you have more or less electrons than you do protons for an atom, that means you'd have an overall positive charge or an overall negative charge. So example of this, even though these are not the ions that carbon would form out in nature, let's just say we had 8 electrons. There's 2 more negative charges than there are positive ones, so this would be a carbon 2-. And then if we had 4 electrons, then we have 2 more positives now than we do negatives, so this would be a 2+. So this one's neutral, and these 2 are ions. Okay, we have a cation and an anion. Isotopes mean that the number of neutrons vary from atom to atom of the same element. So a common isotope of carbon is carbon-12, and carbon-12 also contains 6 neutrons. Okay? Electrons have such small mass, especially even compared to like protons and neutrons. Okay, they're so small compared to protons and neutrons. And so the majority of the mass of an atom is the protons and neutrons, and only a tiny fraction of the mass comes from the electrons. And so if we want to come up with a mass number for a specific isotope, it's the number of protons plus the number of neutrons, or it's the nucleons. It's the things found in the nucleus, which is protons and neutrons. So this would be carbon 12. Because that would be my number of protons plus my number of neutrons. Okay? So if this one also had 6 neutrons, then this would also be carbon 12 isotope, and it's also an ion. It's both an isotope and an ion. And then here, what if we had a different number of neutrons, like carbon 14? Okay, so if this is carbon 14 instead of carbon 12, the mass number is the number of nucleons, protons plus neutrons. So we would need 8 neutrons. Okay, here's another way of writing this. Carbon, and then bottom left is our atomic number, so that would be 6 because we have 6 protons. Upper left is the mass number, so that would be 12. And then if we have a charge, it would go in the upper right. So this one would be carbon 12 with a 2 minus charge, and this one would be carbon 14 with a 2 plus charge. Awesome. Okay, so there's our nucleons, isotopes, and ions, and the difference there. Now, the understanding and the development of what's happening with an atom took a really long time. And initially, the thought was that mass is continuous, that I could continue to cut mass in half again and again and again and again infinitely. But then the idea came along that this is not the case, that there must be a finite point in which I can no longer cut that mass in half anymore. And that's where this idea of an atom came up, these tiny little portions of mass. And these little, they considered them like little tiny, tiny round spheres of mass that were continuous inside, but that we couldn't split it. That was the original idea. Now we know that we can split an atom, but that it would no longer be that element. It'd be something else. Okay, so that's the original idea. J.J. Thomson came along and he discovered that we could emit a negative stream of particles from mass if we added energy to it. And it turns out that stream of particles were electrons. And he's able to determine that this stream of particles was negatively charged. So matter must then contain little tiny negatively charged particles. And so from J.J. Thomson, we had an atomic model that we called the plum pudding model. It was this idea that we have this matrix or mass inside the atom, and inside that matrix we have these tiny little negative electrons. And so that's where the idea, like the plum pudding, that we have our pudding, which is positively charged, and then we have our little negative electrons inside of it. And this was a great justification for why matter is neutral, right? Mass isn't typically positively or negatively charged. And so we have to have, if we have a stream of negative particles, if we know matter contains something negative, then it must be counteracted with something positive in order to make it neutral. Okay, so this matrix or mass was positively charged to cancel out the negative electrons. Okay, so that was J.J. Thomson. Then Ernest Rutherford comes along. And Rutherford completed the gold foil experiment. Remember, plum pudding was believed to be the current model of the time. And they had a rough idea of the size of an atom. And if we're going to distribute the mass of an atom throughout the volume of that atom, it's not a particularly dense item. That we should be able to take something really small and compact like an alpha particle, and it should be able to pass right through this matrix. And so what they did was they shot a stream of alpha particles at a very, very thin sheet of gold foil. And the expectation was that the alpha particles would all pass through the gold foil, supporting the plum pudding model. Now, although most of the alpha particles did go through the gold foil, something odd was recorded. Some of the alpha particles were reflected almost directly back at the emitter, and some had other interesting deflections happening. And so Rutherford had to develop an idea, had to come up with a theory for this observation that he was making. And they were astounded. They could not believe that these alpha particles were bouncing back at them. So if we have this dense little alpha particle and it's being reflected, it's bouncing back, then it had to hit something with the same relative density in order to bounce back off instead of going through it. Okay? So the mass of an alpha particle is 7,000 times greater than an electron. So if these alpha particles were hitting the electrons, they weren't being deflected by them. Think of like a bowling ball hitting a tennis ball. The bowling ball is not going to be deflected by that tennis ball. Okay? So these deflections that they were recording could not be because of the electrons. Also, we knew alpha particles were positive. So if we have this positively charged massive particle compared to electrons that is being deflected and reflected back, then we must have a positively charged similar mass inside of these atoms in order for that interaction to occur. Okay? It must be hitting something that is also positive and contains enough mass in order to deflect it back. That's where he developed this idea of the nucleus. The center of an atom containing most of the mass of that atom that is also positively charged. Okay? So when I look at this, if the nucleus is positive and my alpha particle is positive, and let's say this alpha particle just comes close to the nucleus, then because of that electrostatic interactions, positives repelling each other, it's going to repel that alpha particle and we'll get a small deflection. Okay? And then if the alpha particle hits a nucleus head on, then we're going to get this big reflection back. It's going to bounce off of it. Okay? And so we have to have similar mass in order to get these big deflections, and we must have a positive charge in order to supply these small deflections, and that the vast majority of the atom must be more or less empty, because most of the alpha particles went straight through and they didn't interact with, the electrons wouldn't cause an interaction, and all of this positive mass had to have some small central location. So from this, the Rutherford model was created. We now have a nucleus. It's no longer plum pudding. The nucleus is compact, contains most of the mass, and is positively charged. And electrons are flying around that nucleus. And if this nucleus is positive and the electrons are negative, then there's an attraction between them. So that's what must be holding the electrons to the nucleus, around the nucleus. Okay? This is a great idea. It was amazing that we we're developing this technology that we could further our idea of what an atom looks like. We're still doing that today.